I, 28F, haven't been on speaking terms with my sister, 26F, for almost 6 years now after one really terrible incident that I will get to in a while. My sister and I always had really intense sibling rivalry growing up, and for some reason, my parents never did anything to discourage that. They would actually egg us on to compete more. I think it was not a good move because that made us really jealous of each other, and I feel like if they had nipped it in the bud, maybe things would have been better between us. When we were kids, at least we would be able to put our differences aside for some time, but as we grew up, we started resenting each other more. By the time we were in high school, we barely even spoke to each other, and that was how we liked it. Then I moved out for college and I would only have to see my sister when I would come back home, so that was slightly better than having someone be hostile around you all the time. Around the time that I was supposed to be graduating, I started dating my fiancé. We had been friends for 3 years of college, and before we graduated, he finally worked up the nerve to ask me out, and I said yes because I really liked him too. After we graduated, I got an apartment with him because we had already been friends for 3 years and we didn't think it was a big deal. Once we had completed 3 months together, I decided to introduce him to my parents and took him home with me for dinner one weekend. That was around the time that my sister had also started college, but coincidentally, she had also decided to come back home for the weekend, so we were both there together and it was already a recipe for disaster. My life was going pretty great at that point because I had started working, I had my own apartment, and of course, I had a really loving boyfriend. Unfortunately, my sister wasn't doing all that well. She hadn't been able to get into her first choice and had to settle for her second, so she was already pretty unhappy about that. And later on, I learned from my parents that she was really struggling to make friends in college, which is why she was coming back home every weekend so frequently. Anyway, when I introduced my boyfriend to my parents, I could see that my sister was not happy about this at all, so she just sulked in the background. My boyfriend knew about my strained relationship with her, but even then, with great difficulty, I managed to introduce her to him as my sister. And when I introduced her, some magical change seemed to have come over her, and she turned on her charm. I tried not to be bothered by it, but it was really weird, and after that, she became a different person altogether. While we were all sitting around and chatting, she kept trying to talk to my boyfriend and expressed a lot of interest in his life. I think both he and I were a bit creeped out by her behavior, but said nothing. But while we were having dinner, she started crossing a line because she started flirting with him right in front of me. She wasn't even being subtle about it, it was very obvious, and I could tell that she was just doing this to piss me off. I tried to ignore it for a couple of seconds because I really didn't want my boyfriend to see how dysfunctional our family was, but I just couldn't control my temper at one point. So I just snapped and told my sister to cut it out because he was my boyfriend and it was gross that she was throwing herself at him like this. She just rolled her eyes at me and went back to trying to talk to him, so I started yelling at her and said that he was a guest, and more importantly, he was my guest, so she needed to be more respectful because she was creeping him out. And I remember she told me that she could tell that my boyfriend deserved better and she was just helping him out by letting him know that there were other options than me. The way she said it really ticked me off, and I started cursing at her and she started cursing back. Then, I guess I called her a loser at one point and said that she was only bitter because I was not doing as badly as her, and that really got under her skin. Because at that point, she grabbed my hair across the table, dragged me to her side and slapped me senseless. I couldn't even stop it because I was so shocked that she had physically attacked me, because usually, we had tried to keep our hands to ourselves after we crossed middle school. But after she attacked me, it turned into a full-blown brawl, and our parents and my boyfriend had to drag us off each other because we were vicious. By the end of it, both of us were really injured and all scratched up, but we were still yelling at each other. My boyfriend was the one to drag me away, come and get me inside the car, and then drive us back home while trying to calm me down all the way back. I was really worked up, so I was glad to have him by my side because otherwise, that fight might have gone on for much longer. Anyway, this was the incident after which I stopped speaking to my sister entirely. We had had fights before that as well, but none as nasty as that, and it was pretty much the last straw for me, and if I'm being honest, I was already living away from her, so I did not feel obliged to consider her as a part of my family anymore. The day after that incident, my parents called me up to let me know that they had told my sister off, and even though she was not ready to apologize to me just yet, they were hoping that we would be able to sort it out at some point. I was the one to tell them that I was not interested in sorting it out with her. I wanted things to remain bad between us because I really didn't want anything to do with her anymore. They tried to change my mind, but I told them that part of this was their own doing because right from our childhood, they had never done anything to acknowledge the crazy sibling rivalry we had and had actually encouraged it. So now, they had no right to be surprised that we did not want each other in our lives. They didn't agree with me that day and we ended up arguing, but a couple of days later, they called me up again to tell me that they had realized the mistake and wanted to apologize for it. It was a bit pointless at that stage, but I still forgave them because I was already not going to be speaking to my sister. I didn't want to lose my relationship with my parents as well. Now, 6 years have passed since that incident and I haven't had any contact with my sister, but but I know that my parents have been in touch with her and have a fairly normal relationship with her, which I don't really care about. As long as they were not forcing me to fix my relationship with her, I was cool with it. I have seen her at other family events and stuff, but we never speak, and even when we meet over the holidays, we tend to avoid each other, and that's how I like it. Everyone in the family knows that we don't have a good relationship, but nobody really knows why. They just know that we had a fight. They don't know the specific details, and I intended on keeping it that way because neither of us came out looking good in that incident. So for almost 6 years, I had never spoken to my family about this, but recently, the truth came out at my bridal shower. My maid of honor had only invited a couple of close family members, and of course, my bridesmaids. My fiancée was also there since we weren't going the traditional way and sticking to only inviting female members. I wanted all my favorite people there, but for some reason, my parents decided to go out of their way to invite my estranged sister to the event as well. I genuinely don't know what they were thinking, but when they walked in with my sister beside them, I was really shocked for a couple of seconds, and to my surprise, my sister looked equally shocked to see me there as well. Everyone else in the room had fallen silent when they walked in, and it was so weird because it really felt like a standoff. After what seemed like an eternity, my parents finally walked up to me and they addressed both my sister and I. They said that 6 years had passed since that incident and a lot of things have changed since then. The most important one was the fact that we were both much older and a lot more mature, so they expected us to deal with this situation maturely and make amends with each other. By the look on her face, it was clear that my parents had lied to my sister to bring her here. And before she could say anything, I told my parents that they had no right to do this on a day that was important for me, and I politely asked them to leave along with my sister. I was trying to behave in a dignified manner because I didn't want to put a damper on the event, but my parents did not leave and they told me to let the past go. I guess that really rubbed me the wrong way because they were making it sound like nothing important had happened and it would be very easy for me to just let it go. So just to refresh their memory and let everyone else know what exactly had happened 6 years back, I repeated the entire incident and then asked the room if they thought that this was something that I could just let go of. It would have been a different story if I was getting married to somebody else, but I was getting married to the same guy whom my sister had tried hitting on when I had first brought him home to meet my family. And she had done it shamelessly, right in front of me, and treated him like some part of a competition that he had never agreed to be in the first place. Most importantly, after doing all of that, she was the one who had attacked me first just because I had called her out on her behavior and said that she was a loser. It had been pretty traumatizing for me because, before that, I had never had anyone try to beat me up like that. Even after that, she had never once apologized to me in these past 6 years and had pretended like nothing had ever happened. So I really didn't find it necessary for me to forgive her and let the past go because I thought it was more important for me to hold on to the past, so I did not ever let somebody like her back into my life. And it was ridiculous of my parents to think that they could just show up with her at my bridal shower and expect both of us to go along with it. My parents were about to argue some more with me, but, thankfully, my sister came to her senses and walked out. I guess she was not happy about being lied to either, so my mother went after her, probably to pacify her. My father stayed back with me for a couple of seconds, but I told him that I did not want to speak to him right now because he had really let me down. Then, he started looking pissed off and said that I was being unreasonable and that if something happened 6 years ago, it doesn't make sense to keep holding on to it and acting like a brat over it. Personally, I don't think I was acting like a brat, but at that point, I had no interest in arguing with my father and trying to prove myself right, so I just told him to leave. And after a couple of minutes, he left as well. I had to excuse myself for a couple of minutes afterward to compose myself because I was kind of overwhelmed, but thankfully, my fiancé and my maid of honor were right there for me and I was back to normal within a couple of minutes. After that, we resumed the event as if nothing had happened and everyone else played along since they could understand that I did not want to think about my parents or my sister and needed something to distract myself. Then, once the event was done, I went back home with my fiancé and we didn't speak about that incident afterward. This had happened about 5 days back and I hadn't heard from my parents since then, but I was fine with it because after what they had done, I thought it was better for us to have some time apart. I didn't even think that they were going to contact me by themselves anytime soon, but they did. Unfortunately, it was not to apologize, but to blame me for the situation that my sister is in right now. This morning, I received a phone call from my mother, and as soon as I answered it, she told me that I absolutely had to speak to my aunt to make sure that she gave the position that she had been talking about to my sister and nobody else. She sounded hysterical and very panicked, and I had no idea what he was even talking about, so I had to ask her to back up. Then, she explained to me that my sister had apparently been unemployed for about 6 months now since her previous company had laid a lot of employees off due to downsizing, and a couple of weeks back, she realized that she didn't even have enough money to cover rent anymore, so she had to move back in with our parents and she has been looking for a job, but she can't find anything that she likes and that pays well enough. My mother had spoken to my aunt about this, and since my aunt was starting a new business, she had decided to hire my sister as the head of marketing since that's the department where my sister had been working previously. But after the incident at my bridal shower, where I spoke about what had happened 6 years ago, my aunt had stopped responding to them and had eventually rescinded the offer. That wasn't surprising in the slightest because I had always been my aunt's favorite. Also, when my mother forwarded me the message that my aunt had sent her, I thought it was a pretty reasonable excuse. She had said that from whatever she had gathered from the incident that I had narrated at the party, it was obvious that my sister had serious anger issues. And the fact that she hadn't even apologized for it, not even at the bridal shower, that did not sit right with my aunt, and her behavior was just all off. There was a more qualified candidate for this position whom she had interviewed a few weeks back but had decided to give the job to my sister because she was family. However, she has changed her mind now and the job is going to go to the more qualified candidate. I thought it was completely fair and I was actually pretty glad my aunt had changed her mind because otherwise, my sister would have been nepotism hired. And as somebody who has had to face the consequences of nepotism in the workplace, I didn't want my aunt to be the kind of person who is a part of the problem. So when I read that message, I told my mother that I didn't think that I could do anything about it because it seemed like my aunt had found somebody who was actually fit for the job and more than anything else, that was the reason that my sister was not being hired. I told her that I wouldn't be speaking to my aunt because this was her professional life, and I didn't want to overstep my boundaries. But my mother started losing her mind and began to yell at me, accusing me of sabotaging my sister on purpose by ruining her reputation and image in front of our family. She told me that on the day of my bridal shower, I had absolutely no need to talk about the incident that had taken place although years ago since I hadn't spoken about it for so long. I could have just kept a secret, but she said that I actively wanted to portray my sister as unstable and evil and that's why I had narrated that incident, so I could seek sympathy from the rest of the family and make myself look like the good guy, even though it was me who had instigated that fight by calling my sister a loser, especially when I knew that it would hit her where it hurts. Just for the record, while I was narrating the incident, I had mentioned the fact that I was the one who had called her a loser, after which she attacked me, so it wasn't like I was hiding anything. But even then, I don't think calling her names was something that justified how she got physical, and for my mother to claim that I had talked about that incident on purpose to ruin her image was simply just unfair. So I hung up and I blocked my parents, but I've been thinking about it and I feel like I need to know for sure that talking about that incident was not a bad move. While on the phone call, my mother claimed that my sister was a changed person now, but I hadn't even given her a chance and that was really nasty of me. So Ida for talking about an incident where my sister had attacked me 6 years back which led to her losing out on a job offer? Update 1. Hello, Reddit. Before I get into what happened after I made my original post, I just want to thank everyone who took time from their day to comment on my post. Thank you for all the advice and the kind comments, it really means a lot to me. Now, coming to what happened after I blocked my parents. My sister, obviously, has been blocked for the past 6 years, so she couldn't contact me, and now, neither could my parents. With no other way left to contact me, they decided to visit me. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks, so I really don't have time to deal with all of this. I have a lot on my plate as it is, so when they showed up, I told them to leave because I'd just come back home from work and my fiancé and I had to head out immediately afterward to meet with my designer for a last-minute fitting of my wedding dress. So they had just shown up at the wrong time and we were about to leave, but we couldn't even get out of the house as long as they were standing outside the door because I knew that they would find a way to keep me talking to them and annoy me. I even threatened to call the cops on them, but that did not get them to leave either. And honestly, I didn't want to call the cops because I felt like that would be a little too much and I didn't want to be one of those people who called the cops for every little thing. So after speaking to my fiancé, we quickly decided to let them in, talk to them, and get to know what they wanted, and then we could be on our way. Once we had decided that, we opened the door, invited them in, and told them to make it quick because we had places to be. Thankfully, my parents came straight to the point and told me that because of what I had done at my brother's shower, my aunt had rescinded her offer to hire my sister, and since this was technically my fault, I had to be the way to speak to her and make sure that she got a job one way or the other. It was just the same argument again and I didn't want to keep talking in circles, so I told them that I had already discussed this with my mother on the phone and I had told her that I couldn't do anything about this. So showing up at my house to talk about it once more seemed kind of pointless, especially when I was getting married in a couple of weeks and they knew that I was really busy. Then, my sister interrupted and said that talking about the job offer was not the only purpose of the visit, and it kind of surprised me because that was the first time we had actually spoken to each other in 6 years. Anyway, she continued speaking and told me that the real reason that they were here was because of her since she felt like she really owed me an apology. I honestly don't even know what to tell you guys because I'm still not sure about what I felt at that moment. I was very doubtful of her intentions because I obviously don't trust her. So I decided to be very straightforward with her, and I asked her if she was only here to apologize because she thought that I would be able to help her get the job or if she genuinely wanted to apologize to me. Because if she was only here to apologize because she thought I could get her the job, then there was no need for her to waste her breath because it would not be possible for me. She was a bit surprised by how cutthroat I was but managed to tell me that it was only our parents over here to talk about the job, but she had actually come all the way here to apologize. When I looked at my parents, even they seemed surprised, so this was clearly not something that they had discussed. But my sister did not seem to care about it. She told me that she didn't even care about the job and she was only here to tell me that she had thought about her behavior towards me for a really long time over these past 6 years. And she always found some excuse to not apologize to me, but after the bridal shower, she could no longer run away from the truth, that she had in fact, treated me really badly. I could tell by her behavior and tone that she was serious, and both my fiancé and I are still struggling to process it. She told me that right from her childhood, she felt like she had to me at everything, and that made her very resentful of me. She realized that she had spent her entire childhood and teenage years competing with me for absolutely no reason, because in the real world, it didn't even matter and nobody seemed to care. And she regretted all of it because she could have just as easily been friends with me, since I had tried to be her friend several times, but she had been the one who rebuffed me because she always saw me as competition. It was insane to hear her say all of that, because that's exactly how I had felt, and I don't want to say it, but I kind of started tearing up when she was sharing that experience. Then, she addressed my fiancé and told him that she was also really apologetic for how she had behaved with him the first and last time that they had interacted. She got so caught up in trying to beat me that she didn't even realize what kind of a disgusting person she had become, and this apology was long overdue. After she was done talking, she didn't even wait for us to say anything, and just said that it was not necessary for us to forgive her. She just wanted to get it out of her system, and now that she was going to let us be on our way. So she walked out, and then it was just me, my fiancé, and my parents in the room, who were sitting in absolute shock, trying to make sense of what just happened, because we really hadn't seen any of this coming. After a while, even my parents left without a word, and my fiancé and I headed out a couple of minutes later for the fitting. We didn't even discuss any of this until we had come back home, and only about half an hour ago did we finally get to talking about my sister and what she had said. I thought that it was incredibly mature of her to finally apologize, even though it had taken her 6 years to do so. And judging by her behavior, she had meant every word of it. So right now, we are trying to figure out whether we forgive her or not. It's too soon to tell, because we haven't even started processing all of this yet. My fiancé and I are inclined towards contacting her later and telling her that we forgive her. I have already unblocked her, I just need some more time to tell her that it's fine. But one thing I'm really glad about, even though it took her many years, at least she was able to realize that we could have been friends. Update 2. Hey, so I just realized that I hadn't mentioned what I was planning on doing regarding the situation with my parents in my last update. To be honest, I was so caught up with the situation with my sister, that it completely slipped my mind. Anyway, it's been a couple of days since we last met them, and they haven't bothered to reach out to us since then. And I don't think they're sorry about anything, so we're gonna continue not speaking to them. Honestly, I blame my parents for a lot of things, including how the situation turned out between my sister and me. And even now, they had the chance to be better parents, but they completely screwed it up. I had tried really hard to keep them around as a part of my life, but they've always made it quite impossible. In the past 6 years, we had many fights and arguments, but I always tried to forgive them, but now, I can't do that anymore. I can't keep making excuses for people who so clearly don't care about my feelings. Or even my sisters, if I'm being honest. The bottom line is that we are not going to be speaking to them, and I don't think they're going to be attending my wedding anyway, but just to be on the safe side, my fiancé and I are going to reach out to them in a couple of days and tell them that they are no longer welcome there. So that's that about them. Update 3. Hey, guys. So I got married last week. I had a wonderful time and everything was really beautiful and dreamy, exactly the way I had imagined it to be. My parents, just as I had expected, did not end up attending. My husband and I didn't even need to reach out to them. They sent me an email saying that they wouldn't be attending because there had clearly been some sort of terrible misunderstanding, and because of that, both my sister and I have started villainizing them. And they don't need to be told that we hold them responsible for the kind of relationship that we had, even though they had tried their best to be good parents to us. So now, they plan on taking some time away from us and are going to live their separate lives without bothering to constantly think about their daughters, since we don't appreciate their presence in our lives. I mean, I'm fine with that if that's what they want. On a happier note, I did reach out to my sister a couple of days after I posted my last update, and I told her that I accepted her apology and I would love for her to be present at my wedding. She graciously accepted my invitation and showed up at the wedding, and it was just a really happy day. It's crazy to think that a couple of months ago, if somebody had told me that my parents would not be present at my wedding, but my sister would, I would have laughed in their faces, but here we are now. Anyway, I'm just happy that everything went smoothly and I'm finally rebuilding my relationship with my sister now. Maybe someday my parents will come to their senses and apologize to us, but for now, this is enough for me. My husband and I are going to be leaving for our honeymoon pretty soon, and life has never been better.